Hello and welcome to Cornish Walking Trails. Is this the most haunted street in the UK? Hello everybody, you join us today on the trail of hauntings and quirky stories. It's a fantastic day. It is the most unhaunty type weather. We're on it dull and miserable and overcast.
It's nearly Halloween.
Well, by the time this goes out, Halloween would have been and gone.
Well, technically it's always nearly Halloween.
Well, that's
it's a bit like it's nearly always Christmas.
So we're looking today for quirky stories and ghost stories, aren't we?
We are, and we've come to Penzance.
Yes.
Lots of people associate Penzance with things like pirates and smugglers and stuff like that, don't they? But it's also really haunted.
Yeah. First one is really funny and quirky. In the co-op down here.
Okay. In the co-op?
Indeed.
Okay, come on. Sarah, our first ghost encounter story comes from here. This is the co-op in Penzance. You wouldn't expect it, would you? You wouldn't think it'd be in the co-op. 2003, a ghostly presence who they called George pushed off the shelf a 4-pack of Stella Artois lager.
No.
And it's all true because I read about it in Cornwall Live.
So we're now going to take you down Chapel Street, which seems to have the most reported sightings of paranormal activity. As we walk along Chapel Street, we will actually tell you 21 stories, of which 18 are ghost stories. In a street that's 0.3 of a mile long, that averages one ghost story every 33 yards. An apparition feared in Penzance was an old-fashioned coach drawn by headless horses, which rumbled through the streets. On those same nights could also be seen a procession of coffins wending its way to the churchyard. To see either of these was most unlucky, as a death in the family was bound to happen shortly after. Our next haunted building is the Union Hotel, and this is where it was proclaimed that we'd won at the Battle of Trafalgar. Unfortunately, Nelson had died, but however, years later, the manager at the time told the author of this book how he had experienced 2 paranormal events. The first one was music. He heard music in the first floor, and when he was on his evening rounds checking the hotel, he went up to the second floor. There was no music. On the third floor again, there was music, and he couldn't explain it. It was later thought to be a ghostly resident that used to live here, and she played the piano in a room. She actually lived in the hotel and played the piano in her room at night. So that was one. The second paranormal event was when a resident had parked his car and it blocked the fire escape. He asked politely for the guy to move his car, but the client wasn't happy about doing so. That evening in room 19, the customer was lying in his bed and he felt this presence staring over him, and in the morning he was a totally different character. Said he would never stay in the hotel again.
What if you put that on TripAdvisor?
This room is the assembly room at the back of the Union Hotel. It is magnificent. It was from here that it was announced we'd won the Battle of Trafalgar. Somewhere in here is a death mask of Nelson. So we've just asked to come and have a look at the death mask.
Of Nelson?
Of Nelson.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's here.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Wow. It's kind of both a bit spooky, but really mesmerising at the same time to think they did a cast of his face after he died. So that was brought down to announce that we'd won the Battle of Trafalgar against Napoleon.
Which they announced from the balcony above, didn't
Yes. Wow, what a room!
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive. So it's a ballroom in the Union Hotel.
It's one of Penzance's hidden gems, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's such a huge building. I've got you in silhouette, unfortunately, with the light behind. But there's the other end of the building. Look at those windows.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So beside this ballroom is a lounge, and in here there was 4 women staying in the hotel when they were setting up a shop in town. And they felt a presence, and it spooked them so much. They didn't stay in the rooms that they were allocated. They all stayed in one room. They were so scared. So I've lost track of what floor we're on because we came up a few stairs.
Probably the first floor, maybe?
Can you hear any music?
I can hear something.
What? I can't hear anything.
It's the air conditioning unit.
You had me then. Have you noticed the obligatory squeaky floorboards? When we film these, I get more and more hooked into this because I think I'm a skeptic at heart, and then I start thinking, ooh, maybe.
It's all true, it's in the book.
We decided to go and try and find room 19, which is where the rude customer had this presence in his room all night, and it changed his character.
Is that the room you were staying in?
Yeah.
You complained?
Yeah.
Because you were so freaked out?
Yeah. After we left the hotel, we wondered actually if room 19 was above the lounge area. If you know the hotel well and you can confirm or otherwise, please pop it in the comments. This is the exquisite Egyptian house. It was designed in 1835 and may have been a copy of one in London in Piccadilly called the Egyptian Hall. The architect was inspired by the temple of Hathor at Dendra in Egypt.
It's incredible, isn't it?
The
Egyptian
magnificent
house.
Egyptian house,
Probably
yes.
the most fancy property in this street, isn't it?
It's amazing.
It's incredible, isn't it? So we said the co-op earlier on was haunted. You probably wouldn't expect the co-op to be haunted, would you? This place looks as if it should be haunted. I can't find any record of this place being haunted, the Egyptian house. If you know any different, pop it in the comments.
And if you're enjoying our video, why not subscribe? It's free on YouTube. Give us a like or put something in the comments. We love getting your comments. So this was the Regent Hotel. Is this reputed to be? Is this meant to be haunted?
It is haunted. It's haunted by the ghost of a serving wench.
The Regent is no longer a hotel. It's now apartments. I don't think she's going to have much luck if it's no longer a hotel though.
Isn't she? Did you see all the signage has gone from the outside? Look at this. I love things like this.
What's he found?
The first door. This is incredible,
Wow.
isn't it? Look at that. And in here, come on.
I'm not going up steps backwards. I don't know what he's expecting from me, really.
These must be the original interior doors. Look. Down here.
Yeah. Regent Hotel.
Regent Hotel. Beautiful, isn't it?
Isn't it? Wow.
Oh, I love old buildings, and perhaps that is what gives these haunted stories. All of these buildings along here has got a story to tell, haven't they?
Yeah, it's amazing.
They're
isn't
incredible
it?
buildings, aren't they?
It's one of my favourite streets in Penzance, though, isn't it? Yours?
Yes, yeah, and it's one. I think it's the oldest street in Penzance because originally it went all the way down to where the quayside is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because a lot of that area around the docks is reclaimed land, isn't it? I must show you this. Going at a slight tangent. Come with me.
You're very good at tangents, Danny. Oh my goodness! Wow, I missed that. It's the same height as the cottage.
It's absolutely huge, isn't
It's
it?
bonkers.
So, have you ever heard of Sir Cloudsley Shovel?
What a name!
It is, isn't it? He was a famous admiral. Okay,
Yeah.
He's most famous for a story. It's a ghost story.
Yes.
Okay, 1707. The fleet was coming back from the Mediterranean. They got lost off the Scillies. Okay, bad weather came.
Yeah,
and
storm.
Basically, they reckon about 1,800 men in a variety of ships,
no.
all under his command, floundered off the coast of Scilly's on the rocks.
Awful.
So first of all, this anchor.
I don't think I can get it all in
This
shot.
anchor is off the HMS Association, which was the ship he was on.
Oh yeah.
It was his command. Okay. Now the ghostly story in this is that one of the lads on board one of the boats in his fleet, this young lad told him that he was off Scilly's, and if they didn't change their course, they would all be wrecked.
Right.
All of the captains on the boats, they all said they were off France. They had their bearings wrong.
Yeah.
They basically said to this young boy, you know, who are you? You're an upstart. And they wanted to make an example of him. Anyway, so Cloudsley Shovel decided that he would be reprimanded, this kid, okay?
Oh.
And he basically condemned him to death. And they hung him from the yard arm.
No.
The story goes he hung him from the yard arm, I think of the Association, which was the ship that
Right.
he was on. And they granted him one last wish before he died, and he wanted to read, and it was Psalm 109. And basically, the end of Psalm 109, it was curses, and he cursed him, and he cursed that he would be, you know, all the men associated with him, anybody that saw this would all be cursed, and the curse was that they would all die, and their reputation would be in ruins.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And it came to fruition.
Came to fruition. The interesting thing with Sir Cloudsley Shovel was
Yeah.
that he was washed ashore on the beach at Scilly's. Okay, there's actually a memorial there, and where this memorial is of where he lay, it's surrounded by grass. But where this memorial is, no grass grows.
Oh no.
His body was ultimately exhumed a few days later, and I think he's buried in London, in Marylebone. I think that's where he
Right.
lived.
Okay.
But the really interesting thing is, when he was found without his rings, and he had a famous emerald ring. Okay, and there was a reward put up by his widow for this, and the ring was never found. But there was an old woman that lived on the Scillies, and on her deathbed, about 30 years after this event, she confessed to a priest that he came ashore, she murdered him, he was still alive, and she stole his ring. And she's supposed to have given this ring to the clergyman. But that ring has vanished. Nobody knows where it is. So if you've got it at home, let us know. Put it in the comments. We'll come and film it. Should have read this first, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Anchor from the HMS Association, the flagship of Sir Cloudsley Shovel, wrecked on rocks off the Isles of Scilly, 22nd of October 1707.
Yeah.
But did you know it wasn't the 22nd of October 1707?
Oh.
It's because that was before the calendar was changed. And they've actually worked out that the official date of this, when it actually happened, was in our current year of the November, not the October.
Oh. Andrew, what date is it today? It's the 21st of October.
Oh, come back tomorrow.
So now we're moving on to the Turk's Head, and a fabulous ghost story. It's been around quite a while, this one. It was actually documented in a Victorian book, and we do have a copy with us today. So the site of the current Wesleyan chapel here in Chapel Street, we think it might be part of an estate belonging to a lady called Mrs. Baines. She was a very wealthy woman and owned land from here all the way down to New Road that takes the traffic into Newlyn. So you can imagine it's quite an extensive garden. And being a wealthy lady, she managed to stock her garden with fruit trees. The local children soon got wind of this, and she was really on it. She didn't want her precious fruit to be stolen by the local children, who by stealing it made it even tastier. So this is a collection of stories about the west of Cornwall, and it's written by William Bottrell, Traditions and Half-Sized Stories of West Cornwall, and it was published in 1870. Now if we turn to this, it says The Ghosts of Chapel Street and St Mary's Chapel Yard. It says here, where the School of Art, the Methodist vestries and other houses stand, was known as Mrs. Baines' Orchard. So that's why we think it's probably here. So when the apples were ripe and most tempting, the mistress and her serving man watched the garden by turns. So the man would go down in an early evening, and he'd probably nod off, and she would come downstairs just to check everything was okay and nothing was being nicked. One night, Mrs. Baines, suspecting that her man John was rather careless in keeping guard, sallied forth to see if he was attending to his duty, and not finding him anywhere about the garden, she went to a tree of high prized apples and shook it. And she was planning to take the fruit and teach him a lesson. However, her man John, armed with an old blunderbuss charged with peas and small shot, was at no great distance, dozing under a hedge, so he heard her and he let go. He fired his blunderbuss and it hit her. And she shouted out, "Now you thief, I've paid 'ee off for keeping me out of my bed to watch 'ee. I know 'ee, I do. I'll bring 'ee before his worship and the mayor tomorrow." "Lord help me, I'm killed," she said, and fell to the ground. As it turned out, she had her back to John, and the little pellets were removed really delicately by the surgeon, and she was able to tell her side of the story, which is why we know it. However, a few days later she died, and she's said to haunt her orchard, and it became quite well known that she would be seen at night haunting her orchard. She then started to haunt her own building, to the point that nobody wanted to live in it.
So we reckon that this, which is the yard, well, it's the entrance to the Chapel Street Methodist Church, and so we reckon this might be where the orchard was.
Yeah, all the way down, almost to Newlyn.
Gosh.
To New Road. You know where New Road is in Newlyn? Yes, all the way down was her land. Very wealthy woman. Her husband was something in the Navy? He was
a captain, I think, in the Navy, and he died before her, though, and I think Mrs. Baines was his second wife.
Oh, okay. But anyway, she had a vast fortune, a big house and lots of land.
So right opposite where we are, right, is
the Turk's Head that we mentioned earlier.
Which is, I think, the oldest pub, isn't it, in Penzance?
Yeah, they claim to be, don't they?
Now, that's supposed to be haunted as well.
By Mrs. Baines.
She gets around a bit, doesn't she? So the story goes, if you go into the Turks and you talk about Mrs. Baines, apparently it blows light bulbs.
Blows a bulb, yeah.
Wait, you know what we've got to do?
Go on then. So how does the mystery go?
Well, the mystery goes that if you're sat in the Turks and you're having a drink and you talk about Mrs. Baines, then the light bulbs blow.
Do it again.
Mrs. Baines.
No, nothing. Modern light bulbs, huh? Lifetime guarantee.
Some people might say that our research is illuminating. We come here to shed some light on this mystery. Is it a turn on or a turn off?
Turn off.
Turn off.
Oh, stars.
Madrid.
This is steep. This is the cellar, isn't it?
It would have been, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is incredible. Have you seen this?
Wow. So, that little door is meant to be the beginning of a tunnel so that smugglers and pirates could escape the excise men. So if they came in the front door, the smugglers went out there and the tunnel took them out of the back of the property down towards the quay and they could escape.
It must be really small. Small smugglers.
A big tunnel though.
It's a big tunnel, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness me.
I've heard there's other tunnels in some of the other pubs in the street here as well.
I thought it was the Benbow.
Yeah, well there is one in the Benbow, because that's been uncovered recently, isn't it? When there was building works going on. But I didn't know there was one here in the Turks.
Talking of the Benbow, is that our next stop?
Yes, and we also need to find out where the property was that Mrs. Baines lived in.
Okay, perhaps we'll do that first.
Okay. Can I just show you this? You know I like knockers.
Just noticed
It's in that one. That's a beauty, isn't it? Look at that. Like that. Have you worked it out?
I think so. So it says here that Mrs. Baines had the building in Chapel Street which was a dispensary when this book was written in 1870, with the adjoining house at the entrance to Vandervoort Lane, which is literally right behind you. So Vandervoort Lane goes off down there, and this huge building we're thinking was Mrs. Baines' house.
What, the white one?
Artist residence, yeah.
Okay, so that's sort of like a luxury boutique-y restaurant and hotel now,
yes.
is it? Yes.
Now next to that is obviously all of the chapel and everything, so it makes sense that the chapel is on the ground, is actually standing where the orchard was.
Mm-hmm.
So initially she started haunting the grounds and the orchard, and then she started haunting the property itself, and things started to move around, lights came on, and she was seen at the windows. Eventually people gave up living there. So let's take a look around the back, because the land would have gone from this building and headed all the way down towards Newlyn. So it's difficult to date when Mrs. Baines died. This book was written in 1870 and is a collection of stories, and it says it was about 50 years before this book was written, so probably at the beginning of the 19th century. What a fascinating story.
I've got something else to add.
Oh yeah, go on then.
So, property backs onto this little lane. It's called Vandervoort Lane.
Yeah.
Now, I don't speak Cornish, but my limited knowledge of Cornish, I'm pretty sure that Vander in Cornish means lane. So it's Lane Vor Lane.
Okay.
I was also reading that originally this went all the way through down to the quay.
Yeah.
Before this was developed behind. I think it was called Great Lane.
Oh, okay. It's a great Vander.
So I don't know what Vor means, because I've heard that used in mining as well. Vor.
Oh, okay.
There's a wheel Vor, isn't there?
We should look it up.
I'll look it up. Yeah.
We'll look it up and run it along the screen. This building literally is opposite the Admiral Benbow, which is shut on a Monday, isn't it, Andrew?
Unfortunately, we're here on a Monday. And they're closed. That's a shame.
Admiral Benbow is famous for the figure on the roof.
Fantastic, isn't it? So that figure on the roof there, crouching with the pistol like that, is supposed to be Octavius Lanyon, and he was head of the Benbow Brandy Men, a notorious group of smugglers, and that's supposed to reenact the moment where the customs officers came to arrest him, and he managed to get up onto the roof and he was firing at them. I think he ultimately got caught and he was executed. That's the story, but it's nothing to do with the hauntings. Apparently there's 7 hauntings in the Admiral Benbow.
Yeah, so many. We've actually written them down. The first haunting. Where are you?
I'm here.
There's a figurehead inside that was salvaged from a shipwreck, and the figurehead's eyes, although they're opaque, are meant to follow you around the room. Second one?
Yeah. Cushion falls off a chair regularly, apparently.
The door in there, even though it's a self-closing door, opens on its own.
There's a particular chair that moves in there as well.
By the fireplace. Apparently Annabelle or Arabella is meant to haunt it. She lost her love at sea.
Oh, okay. There's a haunting in the cellar, apparently.
Yeah, more about that in a minute.
Okay.
And there's a young woman that's meant to be seen in the upstairs windows. So going back to that one in the cellar, there's also a passage that goes down to Abbey Wharf.
Like we've just seen in the Turk?
Yeah, about smuggling. So do you think things that went bump in the night were possibly people in the tunnel?
Could be, or people had one too many. It's a wonderful building, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know it's shut at the moment. It's a real shame that we can't go inside. We'll see if we can get some images of the interior, because a lot of it is on the theme of items that were salvaged at sea. I think one of the previous landlords was really keen on that sort of stuff, and a lot of it has come off old wrecks. Have you seen the door? The door's incredible.
It is, isn't it?
It's got 4 different images on the door, all maritime linked.
So obviously that top right,
That's Neptune.
isn't it?
There's
And a mermaid.
there.
Yeah.
So what have we got here? Again,
A
it looks like a
mermaid and a
mermaid with a dolphin. And then look at this. This is obviously about shipwrecks, I would have thought, isn't it? And this is what, symbolising the wind, do you think, and the wreck?
Possibly, or an angel coming to help them.
Oh, could be.
Yes.
It's good, isn't it?
It is excellent. Just passing the Abbey, which is a hotel. We thought that would have a ghost story, but we couldn't find anything. If you know of a ghost story about the Abbey Hotel, pop it in the comments, we'd love to know. There is another ghost story around the Quay area. But before we get there, that old book, the green Victorian book, must just read you a story from there. It's not a ghost story, but it is a fabulously quirky story, and it really made me go, ooh. So back to our collection of stories from the West Country, and this one is entitled Madame Trezillian's Headdress. Now this comes from an era when ladies wore wigs that went up in the air. Think Marge Simpson. Right? And it went to the point, the extreme, where beds were actually made bigger because these ladies used to keep these headdresses on all day, even at night when they were sleeping. And they would have them done and they would stay in place for weeks on end, particularly around festival times. So Madame Trezillian's headpiece was not disturbed for a couple of weeks, until she felt such a headache that she was obliged to send for Dr. Madram from St. Just, that he might see what ailed her noddle. Still the precious mass of wool, pomatum, etc. remained undisturbed on the outside when the doctor arrived and insisted on having it taken down and opened. Then, they say, he found a nest of mice, which had been littered in the greasy pads which raised the lady's hair, beside any quantity of fly bows in different stages of growth. That is just disgusting. So larvae of flies that actually laid their eggs probably in the mice poo. So you can imagine what greeted the doctor when he opened up this headpiece was this nest of mice with larvae of flies crawling around in her hair. Anyway, what had happened to her head was it had got in such a state that they ended up having to shave all of her hair off. Well, the story doesn't end there. So the wig maker with the remaining hair made her a headpiece. It wasn't a complete wig, but it was enough to cover her bald head. The next feast day she was walking through Penzance and looking wonderful. She went past a hook. The headpiece ended up being hooked and removed. It was left on this hook as she walked down the street, and the boys were just laughing at her in the street, and she didn't know why, until she realised and felt so embarrassed. What a wonderful story. I love that story. The thought of the mice in her head day and night that she didn't know, and then these fly larvae laying their eggs. Oh, it just makes you go, ooh. Yeah, so she had a nest of mice in her hairdo.
God, that is terrible, isn't it? Can you imagine it? She's like lying in bed, in a extended bed at night. Yeah. And she must be like hearing noises.
Yeah.
Like her room must be haunted or something like that. There's actually mice in her hair.
Yeah.
Is it?
Disgusting,
Do you think that's what they call a hair-raising story?
Oh. Just gives me the creeps. It must have stunk. Come on, what's next? What's next?
I've got something really interesting I found in this book, but we need to get down to the Quay for me to explain it to you.
Okay, let's go. Why not support us on our channel and help us out by maybe buying us a coffee? And a big huge thank you to everybody that does help us out every now and again. Here's a list of your names to say thank you from us for your generosity. There's the new road, the dry dock. We're now at the older part of Penzance Quay with the Abbey Warehouse. And you have a story?
Yeah, it seems quite apt to read this here. This book is called Cornwall and Its People by A.K. Hamilton Jenkins. And love that picture as well, by the way. It's great, isn't it? This is written in the early 1930s. Anyway, he's talking in here he says this is about a house at the beginning of the 1800s, okay? So he says, in the case of a house which about the beginning of the last century formed part of some old premises near the quay at Penzance, owing, as it was said, to have some nocturnal and ghostly wanderer who, being deprived of rest itself, was resolved that all others should be in a like condition. Yeah. This particular house had long remained unoccupied. Old people, however, of that date could recall the time when the place had been a public house.
Oh, wow.
And stated that a sailor who was known to have possessed money had previously disappeared in its neighbourhood. and had never afterwards been heard of again.
Oh no, so the implication was he's been killed for his money.
Disappeared, isn't it? It says, at length, in the year of 1813, the premises were purchased and a small part of them was taken down in order to erect a smelting house for refining tin for the China market. During the work of demolition, a human skeleton, greatly decayed, was discovered beneath one of the floors, and this was believed to be none other than that of the unfortunate mariner whose ghost had so long disturbed the precincts wherein the murder had been committed.
So the book doesn't actually tell us whereabouts or what building,
no,
does
it doesn't tell us what public house it would have been. But it's obviously in this area.
Yeah.
At first I did wonder if this was the property of Mrs. Baines, but the story about Mrs. Baines and her being shot was, I think, from about 1807.
Yes.
And this talks about the skeleton being discovered in 1813, but if it was deeply decayed,
it predates Mrs. Baines.
Yeah, and I don't think her premises was ever a public. So,
and also he's a sailor.
Yes, yeah. But it would have been in this area somewhere.
I've lost count of how many ghost stories we have recounted in one short street in Penzance.
It's been a few, isn't it? So we're not finished yet either. There's another property down here where there's at least 3 ghost stories attached to it. And then we're going to finish with an absolute beauty.
In the graveyard.
Yeah,
it's always in the graveyard.
Always in the graveyard. The pub behind me, Sarah, we're down by the quay.
Yes.
It's called the Dolphin.
Oh, indeed, didn't that used to be the actual edge of the quay?
Yeah, I think the water came all the way up to here. Where we're standing now is all reclaimed, isn't it? It's a 16th century pub, so as you'd expect, because it's so old, it's haunted. There's at least 3 ghosts there. First of all, there's a ghost of an old sea captain, a salty sea dog. He had a very bushy beard, apparently. He wears a tricorn hat. He's got a lovely jacket with shiny buttons on and lace ruffles on his sleeves. He goes by the name of George, and he's seen quite regularly, apparently. There's also a ghost of an old Victorian lady, and she just floats across the main bar area. And finally, there's a ghost of a young man who's alleged died there by falling to his death.
Oh no!
And people that stay there, including the landlord, apparently he's quite often seen at the foot of their bed. He'll either be sat on the bed or the bottom of the bed, and the moment they talk to him, he disappears.
Oh wow! What a fantastic story. So there's reputed to be 3 ghosts in there.
I wonder if they get on. I enjoy watching. I enjoy watching the ghosts on BBC, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know people from abroad sometimes watch our stuff as well. I don't know if they can get that abroad, but
it's hilarious. They did a US version.
Oh, did they?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we tried to watch it, but I think we were so...
Oh, I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
Yeah, I think it confused us because we were so used to seeing our version of ghosts.
They do. That's But you can imagine these properties having multiple ghosts, isn't it? I often wonder, you know,
from different eras.
If you're stuck for the whole of eternity with somebody you don't like.
So what did Mary always used to say?
What did Mary say? Oh, they got sucked off.
Yeah, they've been sucked off, yeah.
You can't say that, don't put that in the video,
can't.
We'll get complaints.
Yeah. And finally, as Trevor MacDonald used to say,
he did say that, didn't he?
We're heading out towards St Mary's Church of England church, where we have to go in the graveyard. You can't have a ghost themed video without going in a graveyard, can you? That's where they are.
It's compulsory.
What's that? 1833? 5? I don't know.
Do you reckon that would have been an old pump, maybe, or a well?
Water source, I reckon.
So we're back on Chapel Street.
We are. We are.
Where are we going, sir?
We're going to actually go into the graveyard. This is the kind of underneath of St Mary's Church.
Which is up there.
I feel very small. But you can't do a ghost-themed video without visiting the churchyard, can you? Quick, else you can be a ghost.
He's not doing 20.
to this fantastic book. And this story relates to St Mary's Chapel Yard, which is a little bit confusing because the C of E is a church and there's a chapel up the road. Anyway, I had a quick Google search and St Mary's is definitely the church. So it says about the time that Mrs Bain's ghost carried on its freaks in the above mansion, an open pathway passed through St Mary's Chapel Yard, which was then often crossed as it shortened the distance to the quay. But for a long time few persons liked to pass through the burial ground by night because a ghostly apparition, arrayed in white, was often seen wandering amongst the tombs, from which doleful sounds were sometimes heard. The fearful figure was also met on a path or seen in the chapel porch. One dark and rainy night, however, a sailor who neither knew or cared anything about the ghost of St Mary's took the shortcut, came as far as the chapel porch, when the ghost issued forth on the path, and there stood, bobbing its head and waving its shrouds at him. "Halloa! Who or what are you?" said the sailor. "I am one of the dead," the ghost answered. "If you are one of the dead, what the deuce do you do here above ground? Go along down below," said the sailor, and he lifted his fist and dealt the ghost a stunning blow over its head, which laid it sprawling on the stones, where it remained some time, unable to rise or descend, until a person passing helped him to get back on his feet, and they discovered that a frolicsome gentleman called Captain Carthew, who lived nearby, had long been diverting himself and frightening the townsfolk out of their wits by impersonating the ghost, which was most effectively laid by Jack Tar and his fist. So this man was actually coming into the graveyard at night in a shroud, deliberately looking like a ghost to frighten everybody out of their wits. You couldn't write it really, could you? So obviously this was quite a long time ago, this story. We're not quite sure if it relates to St Mary's here or the chapel, which would have been next to Mrs Bain's property. So we're just going to have a quick look around and see if the graveyard here has any memorials that date back to pre-1800. Thomas Richards, he went in the ground in 1821, so yeah, it looks like this graveyard was open. I can just about make this one out. So it says beneath here lies Nicholas Daniel, who died, where does it say? Gosh, you can just about make it out. He was born on the 25th of December 1799, so it looks like he died in April 1817. So having one grave to prove that this was an open graveyard at the time of those hauntings and of those stories is enough to satisfy me. I don't know how Andrew's doing over there, but I kind of want to get out of here. Who knows who's lurking around? Are you cheeky? Hey, are you cheeky?
Can you imagine if that Captain Carthew was like around now, and when he was like writing out his like Tinder profile, it says, "What do you like doing in your spare time?" Well, tell you what I like doing. I like going into the churchyard, middle of the night, put a white sheet over me, going up to sailors and trying to scare them. That's what I like to do. What do you like to do?
Swipe left. Well, that's your right. Swipe left, but that's my right. Okay. It doesn't work on film, does it? So we've told you 21 stories, of which 18 are ghost stories, in one street that's 0.3 of a mile long. Is this the most haunted street in the UK?
Yeah. Have you been to Penzance? Have you had a strange experience in Penzance? perhaps put it in the comments. Maybe think about it first, just to make sure it's not too scary. You know, we don't want to upset anybody. But thank you for joining us today. I've enjoyed going around today, looking at all these haunted locations in Penzance.
It's fantastic. I do like Penzance. So from us for now, we're going to say goodbye for now, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.